Support comes from
Entergy provides much more than power. We support science and engineering at local schools to build a brighter path to better jobs and help prepare the next generation. Because together, we power life. Entergy.
additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
Nothing's been done like this before.
A massive coastal restoration proposal gets a boost from the White House.
We could lose providers that want to be part of the Medicaid program.
Why Medicaid copays could face big hurdles.
The easy way would be to vote for $1 billion in taxes.
Republicans ask for spending reforms. Hi, everyone. I'm Andre Morrow. Much more on those stories in a moment. First, there's some possible funding for a long-awaited project to relieve flooding in the capital area. The Comeet River Diversion Canal has been on the drawing boards since the 1980s, but this latest development doesn't mean we're any closer to breaking ground on it. Senator John Kennedy proposes using a pool of money he doesn't have any control over. It's $175 million of unclaimed property the state treasurer's office oversees. Governor John Bel Edwards says that money can't be used for this, but a stalled bill in the U.S. Senate could provide the answer for funding. We will keep our eyes on it for you. Right now on SWI, the state we're in, the week's other headlines. Louisiana got its due during President Trump's first State of the Union.
With us tonight is one of the toughest people ever to serve in this House. A guy who took a bullet, almost died, and was back to work 3.5 months later. The legend from Louisiana, Congressman Steve Scalise.
The House Majority Whip got a huge standing ovation. He's still recovering from being shot last June during a congressional baseball practice. Trump also singled out volunteers from the Cajun Navy for racing to the rescue with their fishing boats to save people in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. Senator Bill Cassidy and Congressman Garrett Graves were among GOP leaders on a train headed to a retreat Wednesday when it crashed into a garbage truck at a rail crossing in West Virginia. None of the lawmakers were hurt. As you see in this photo, Cassidy, a former doctor, helped the injured. His wife, Laura, a former trauma surgeon, was also on the scene. Cassidy tweeted that one person in the truck was killed, one seriously injured, and one had minor injuries. Increased TV and film production is breathing new life in the Hollywood South. Spending on projects rebounded in the state in 2017, nearly doubling the year before. In 2016, Louisiana went into free fall following changes to the state's controversial film tax incentive program. The legislature adjusted the changes, returning confidence to film here. An invitation from LPB, Southern, and Grambling universities to watch special preview screenings of the independent film Tell Them We Are Rising, the story of black colleges and universities. It happens Monday, the 5th of February at 6 p.m. at Southern's University Cotillion Ballroom and in the Eddie Robinson Museum on the campus of Grambling. The event is free, but RSVP by email or by calling the number on your screen. This historic event is a first of its kind in that there will be a 45-minute town hall conversation between the two universities via Skype as part of the event. A man who knows success, Jim Bernhardt of Baton Rouge, had the ear of the Baton Rouge Rotary Club this week. He built and sold a Fortune 500 company, the Shaw Group, for $3 billion. He heads currently Bernhardt Capital Partners, and this could outgrow Shaw. He told the crowd some facts about Baton Rouge and our state, that we may be good in some areas, but not great. Problems with crime, education, and infrastructure holds us back, he says. But he says, here's how we can be great.
Everyone has to help. Everyone has to just put it out on the line and say, look, man, we're not good enough. It's okay. Everyone already knows. It's not a secret.
Everyone in the state pulling together on one team. We look forward to having him on our show in the coming weeks. The governor and lawmakers moved closer in negotiations this week for how they want to deal with $1 billion less in tax dollars to spend come July 1st. If there's a special legislative session, it may happen in late February. LPB's Kelly Spires spoke with the movers and shakers around the Capitol, and you have news for us.
That's right, Andre. This week, the leader of the House, Speaker Taylor Barras, proposed several spending reforms and transparency measures that might, if passed alongside each other, might make renewing or raising taxes more palatable. Let's take a look. Even after Governor John Bel Edwards presented his doomsday budget scenario last week, which cut over $600 million from hospitals and gutted the scholarship program TOPS, some conservative Republicans still didn't see the need for any more revenue.
Obviously, we need to continue working to improve the budget that he gave us. Do I think we need to raise $1 billion in taxes? No. I don't think that's something that we should even consider at this point.
Representative Cameron Henry leads the committee that has the first go at revising the governor's spending proposal. Henry points to things that are already happening, like improved oil prices and more money in state coffers due to the Trump tax plan, as reasons to wait on revenue-raising measures. House Speaker Taylor Barras says a lot of his members are feeling that way.
The easy way would be to vote for $1 billion in taxes. The more logical way is let's give credit to what the economy is doing for us. Let's take into consideration what the feds are doing for us, and let's see if we need to raise the rest or adjust the appropriations for the rest.
Barras says the budget as it is proposed cannot happen, and lawmakers need to meet in special session to find a solution before regular session begins in March, so that parents will know that TOPS will be funded.
That one in particular worries me the most about timing. And that, you know, if they have a decision by early March on that some confident level of funding for TOPS, although the budget's not passed till later in the year, at least there's a positive direction.
Barras has been in talks with Edwards this week. Barras has proposed adding requirements and adjusting eligibility calculations for Louisiana residents who get Medicaid from the state. He also wants to update what he calls an outdated formula to calculate how much the state can spend. But he says his proposals might not add up to money to offset this cliff.
And these are not necessarily, they're certainly not revenue raisers, but they're what we consider budget spending reforms to prevent future cliffs as we go forward.
He also wants to create a website so taxpayers can more easily understand how the government spends their money.
Most of these are very reasonable recommendations, but in the name of transparency, more so if we, put more revenue on the table or ask taxpayers for a little bit more money, that's certainly giving them the opportunity to view where it's all spent is critical.
As far as what revenue-raising measures conservatives might agree to?
I think with the reforms, you have the opportunity. I think members continue to look at exemptions, credits, rebates, and those kinds of things. We did some of that in 2015 and 2016. In fact, I remind members in 2015 and 2016, all of those efforts that we made raised $756 million in revenue.
In July, a load of sales tax exemptions would kick in to 1% of the sales tax. Members might look to keep those exemptions off, maybe temporarily, perhaps permanently, maybe in part.
Whether that totals, $250 million or, $550 million, there's a combination of those things that I think a lot of members are still looking to be supportive.
Robert Travis Scott leads a good government group called the Public Affairs Research Council. He hopes lawmakers will tackle big issues, too. He says reforming the state employee pension systems, for example, could knock down costs.
So I don't think people realize how much we're paying for our state employee and teacher pension systems right now. Our unfunded accrued liabilities that have stacked up over time are an enormous burden on our state budget and on the agencies and on their budgets as well.
The state's colleges and universities have seen the consequences of that.
The universities are really suffering from this because what happens is you give an appropriation to the university and most of their money is already spent. Right away they have a bill they have to pay. to apply towards the pension debt, and they don't have that flexibility to spend it on education.
Special session, of course, isn't the time to tackle that, but Barras says that members are working on measures to reform pensions, the spending for state construction projects, and funding for state worker jobs that haven't been filled.
I think there'll be certainly more work to come on that. As it relates to the cliff, I think people got refocused on cliff and immediate effect of the cliff, and trying to find solutions there.
Still, some of the big ticket items like tax reform may not be palatable in any kind of session.
You have a number of things that can be done as it relates to constitutional efforts with taxing that I think is probably a valuable exercise. Very difficult to do in a regular session when you're debating the budget, although parts of that legislation could be considered, and certainly almost impossible to do in a special session.
A constitutional convention, Barras says, if only for the parts of the Constitution that deal with spending money, might be the only way to tackle these structural issues. So for now, these spending reform measures and revenue raisers are on the table. We'll see next week if a special session is called to tackle the cliff, but don't expect much more than that in fixing the state's fundamental issues.
All right, Kelly, thank you so much for that. And up next, we dive into how the Speaker's proposed changes to Medicaid would really work. The bulk of recommendations by Barras deal with changes to the state's Medicaid program, which is the biggest expense for the state's taxpayers. Senior producer Kevin Gautreaux explores the proposed changes and what they could mean.
The 2016 expansion of Medicaid in Louisiana added health care coverage for 400,000 new residents, plus increased expenses to the state's health care budget. But legislators hope to reduce those costs by implementing Medicaid co-pays.
Basically, what that takes place is when the Medicaid recipient presents themselves for services, they pay a copay or a percentage of the procedure.
Senator Fred Mills sits on the Medicaid Task Force for Fraud and Abuse and is a pharmacist. He says that Medicaid copays have been used in Louisiana's pharmacy business since the 80s, but the expansion of Medicaid has broadened their appeal as a potential cost savings measure.
Copays would save the state money by actually generating some revenue to put back into the state general coffers. So if you could generate some revenue from the copays, you theoretically could take that, put it back in the state general fund and leverage it for more federal dollars.
House Speaker Taylor Barras' Medicaid reforms would extend copay requirements for certain prescription drugs and implement copays for the non-emergency use of hospital emergency rooms. But collecting copays can present a problem. Don Gregory is the state's former Medicaid director and current healthcare advisor to the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana.
Copays are also kind of tricky in Medicaid because the provider cannot refuse to provide the service if the patient can't pay their copay. So the provider ends up basically taking a pay cut.
Gregory says providers and hospitals in Louisiana are already receiving extremely low reimbursements from companies that manage the care of Medicaid patients.
The federal government has lots of rules around access to care and the assurance of access to care. And one of the rules they have is if you use managed care as a model for delivery of services, you have to assure through actuaries that the payments you're making to the managed care plan are adequate to assure access to care. And Louisiana's rates are at the bottom of that actuary certified rate.
Mills says he's heard from healthcare professionals that the current reimbursement rate doesn't cover their hard costs.
So there's no profit even involved. So if you take that copay piece to it and that copay is not collectible, that becomes extremely problematic. And what concerns me is we could lose providers that want to be part of the Medicaid program. With more lives in the program, you need more providers, not less.
Mills says if copays end up costing providers even more, it could open the state up to litigation.
In the event that copays would have to be absorbed by the provider, we could get into really some dangerous waters with the feds, because the federal government basically says that you have to be reimbursed, you have to reimburse a provider at least their cost, minimal their cost.
Another challenge for Louisiana could be the tracking of who would and would not be required to pay a copay.
You can't charge copays to children. You can't charge copays to pregnant women. And there are certain services you can't charge copays for. You can't charge a copay once copays have reached 5% of the family's income. So you have to have a very sophisticated computer system that will recognize that you should be charged a copay, but I should not.
Mills says state technology may not be up for the task.
I do have concerns that right now maybe we not driving a Jaguar, maybe we driving a horse and buggy from a software standpoint. So what I need to find out, and I think everybody needs to find out before we get too excited about implementation, is where are we at in our core software system at Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals? No fault of anybody, but that's just the reality. I don't think the feds will let us put a program in that we can't monitor.
The remaining Medicaid reform proposals would reduce the margin of error allowed for Medicaid recipients when reporting their income from 25% down to 10%, and add 20 hours of some form of work requirement for Medicaid recipients. While Mills expects the proposed Medicaid reforms to pass through the legislature, the final plan will still need approval from the federal government, and that does not happen quickly.
I do want to caution everyone that it does take time for these approvals to take place. So what you see passed maybe and signed by the governor in July may not even show up until a year and a half, 2 years away. So this is not a fix for this year's budget issue. It's not going to take place this fiscal year.
For the state we're in, this is Kevin Gautreaux.
Senator Mills says the jury is still out on whether Medicaid copays are working in other states. Perfect weather and an assist from the White House helped make the ribbon cutting led by Governor John Bel Edwards of LSU's Center for River Studies even more special. Edwards called a newly signed pledge from the Trump administration a monumental achievement. It means construction on one of the key components designed to reverse years of land loss in Louisiana could begin in 2 years.
If you leave federal bureaucracies to do what they tend to do, you will never speed up the process.
The governor and state leaders got the good news from the White House just days before they toured this facility that's dedicated to coastal protection and research. The Memorandum of Understanding from Trump is designed to cut through government red tape and speed up the permitting process. A major piece of the restoration plan is at issue here, the Mid-Barataria Diversion Project, south of New Orleans in Plaquemines Parish. The faster process means construction of it could begin by 2020. This is an aerial view of where the massive project would happen, and also how it looks on the state-of-the-art Lower Mississippi River model, the crown jewel inside the Center for River Studies.
From the Water Institute perspective, our job is to apply the best science, analysis, and modeling to help the state and all the other parties move forward in the permitting process. So, of course, it's good news to see that that process is going to move forward efficiently and effectively.
The memorandum sets an August 2019 deadline for a decision on permits from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and other federal agencies. The project carries a $1.4 billion price tag.
This is exciting for us because it's for lack of a better term, it's big boy construction.
Yeah. Rudy Semino, engineer manager of the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority, calls it big boy construction because of the sheer size and scope of it.
Nothing's been done like this before, a diversion that diverts water and sediment. We see diversions all over the country and world that divert water for flood control purposes. The Bonnie Carey Spillway is nothing more than a diversion, but its goal is not to divert sediment, it's to get water out of the river to protect the city of New Orleans. We're building a sediment diversion. Same concept, we're gonna put a concrete gated structure in the levee. So we're gonna breach the levee and drop a structure in, and we're gonna dig a 2.5 mile channel that connects the river to the basin. All of these things have been done before in other projects. To do them for this purpose is unique.
Reconnecting the Mississippi River to coastal wetlands, in this case, Barataria Basin in Plaquemines and Jefferson parishes, scientists believe would recreate what the river did naturally for thousands of years, allow sediment-rich water to build up land instead of flushing out into the Gulf of Mexico.
As we all know, coastal Louisiana was built, really this whole state was built by the Mississippi River. And after the flood of 1927, when the Corps of Engineers came in and leveed the Mississippi River, it severed that sediment supply that literally built the land that we stand on today.
By 1932, we were seeing land erode, and in the years since, nearly 2,000 square miles of the state has vanished. So why is this particular spot on the west bank of the river near Myrtle Grove so important?
First of all, its location. The river is full of sandbars. At every bend, there's a bar. We strategically put this project on that sandbar to harness that sand. So every year when the river gets high, as it's about to do right now, it actually picks up the sand on that sandbar and moves it, it mobilizes it. What we want to do is time the opening of the structure to when the sand is mobilized, so when the flood season comes. So you can kind of think of it this way: when we're in flood season right now, we'll open the gates, let the sand and the water out. When the river goes back down in the late summer and fall, we'll close it, and we're not getting any sediment, so we don't have a reason to open it.
The CPRA is also looking at a similar diversion project on Breton Sound, just north of the last reaches of the Birdfoot Delta. The agency and the Water Institute say Mid-Barataria is the first big test of the agenda to do big things to revive our coast.
What we've done is we have modeled from what we call the no action scenario through a series of additional scenarios. So without harnessing the power of the river, of course, we have an existential crisis in coastal Louisiana. And what diverting the Mississippi River will do, all of our modeling shows, is it will build back land that we have lost and continue to preserve land that we have now.
The timetable to build the Mid-Barataria structure is 3 to 5 years. This past weekend, the 70th Louisiana-Washington Mardi Gras gave Republicans and Democrats a chance to put aside political differences and let the good times roll. The Washington Hilton was where it all happened. Days of events concluded with the Mardi Gras Ball Saturday night. Thousands packed the expansive Hilton ballroom, and these pictures show all the fun. Well, after that was all over, it was back to real work for our politicians in D.C. Bryn Stoll is a reporter for The Advocate, and he joins us now from his post there in the nation's capital. Bryn, like here, there's trouble with the budget in Washington since October. Some short-term solutions have been approved. How are they affecting Louisiana?
Well, it's injected a lot of uncertainty into negotiations in Congress and really eaten up a lot of the oxygen. So there's very little of anything else that has been getting done on Capitol Hill, which has pushed a number of other priorities that Louisianans would like to see get done to the back burner. And it's also injected it's created a lot of uncertainty budgeting wise for the United States military, which has a lot of installations in Louisiana, and for the federal workforce, anyone who works for the federal government in Louisiana.
Of course, flooding and flood insurance is a big deal for Louisianians. Talk about that a little bit and how some of the flood insurance reforms might be affecting us.
There's been a rolling debate about what to do with the National Flood Insurance Program, which is pretty much the only way that the vast majority of homeowners in this country can get flood coverage. The program expired on September 30th, and Congress couldn't reach an agreement on a long-term deal there. So instead, it's been what they call attached to these continuing resolutions, which is how we've been funding the government.
How's that affecting people on the ground?
Well, one of the things that's happened, there was a short lapse. And when there's a lapse in the program, that means home sales in flood zones can't go through. You can't renew a policy. And the other thing that's happening is we've had a series of now 3, and we're looking at a 4th, very short-term extension to the program, so just a few weeks. And that means that anyone who's thinking about buying a home or building a home doesn't really have a good idea right now of what kind of flood insurance premiums or coverage they'll be looking at 3 or 4 years from now.
I'm wondering, how is Louisiana affected and immigration negotiations? How are they affecting people in Louisiana? Is any different ways than other states?
A bit on the back burner right now. It has not been in the center of immigration discussions yet, but there's several temporary visa programs that are very popular for seasonal work aboard cruise ships, for sugarcane processing, seafood processing, industries that are very big, especially in South Louisiana, and for some seasonal harvesting work in the north, the H-2A, H-2B visas. And there's been some look at trying to cap those or bring those down. And that's caused a lot of nervousness among farmers, among seafood processors in Louisiana, because they rely pretty heavily on a seasonal foreign workforce to fill those jobs.
I want to touch on infrastructure a bit because that's an ongoing issue in Louisiana with gas tax failing, roads not being built, and infrastructure way behind. What about Louisiana being able to take advantage of the matching funds that they are depending upon from the feds? But if we don't do our part, that could leave us in trouble to get some of those federal dollars.
Right. So President Trump has talked even during the campaign trail and since he became president about a big infrastructure package, $1 trillion, right. $1.5 trillion. The framework that we've seen so far, including some details that came out on Wednesday, suggests that what he's actually looking to do is about $200 billion of federal funding, which would then try to get leveraged against much more state, local, or private money.
Bryn Stoll from Washington, your advocate bureau there. Thanks so much for joining us and keeping us up to date on some of the things that you're working on daily and reporting back to us here in Louisiana. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me anytime.
The latest short-term funding measure and the flood insurance program attached to it expires next Thursday. That's February 8th. Will lawmakers avoid a shutdown and pass a long-term deal? We will monitor it here on SWI. And that's our show for this week. Remember, you can watch LPB on demand on your phone or tablet with our LPB Anywhere app. The download is free from your app store, and you can catch LPB news and public affairs shows, as well as other Louisiana programs that you've come to enjoy over the years. And please like us on Facebook as well. For everyone at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Morrow. Thanks for watching. Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Check us out on Facebook and Twitter and visit lpb.org where you can view more stories and leave us a comment. This program is available on DVD. Support comes from
Entergy provides much more than power. We support science and engineering at local schools to build a brighter path to better jobs and help prepare the next generation. Because together, we power life. Entergy.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.